Right. I think this is just going to be a listening event anyway. Okay.
Guys, we'll get going here very shortly. Going to give a few more minutes just for everyone to jump in. All right, let's get going here, guys. We'll see if we can share my screen. All right. So glad you could make it. For everybody that's here today, I hope I've got some value to deliver to you today. One will be actually showing you a working operating system for everything we are discussing today, which should be helpful. So we're not just here talking about the problem, we're actually showing you the solution and how to solve the problem um, yourself or with our assistance or a version of that in between. So I guess the first part of this is, understanding what SOPs are, what they're not. And, the first question we've got to ask ourselves is, do we actually have anything written down? Okay. So anyone that's operating a business today knows that when you get to a certain place and scale, delegation becomes your primary role, right? So if we don't know how to delegate, we don't know how to get things off our plate, we can generally remain pretty stuck in our business. And I see this most often at actually every single level of business in every shape and form. And really, it's a simple problem to solve. And it's really about identifying what you need to do exactly to be able to get things off your plate. Right. So if you're one of these guys on this call that has everything living in their head, all right, nothing written down, this is a call for you. Maybe you have a few post-it notes or text, maybe a Google Doc somewhere. All right. Or maybe you have a real binder or a trainual or something along those lines. All right. This is still a conversation that we can have because I've seen a lot of owners go down the path of creating a operations manual or SOP manual so they can delegate um, and not quite get through it, therefore not being useful. Okay. So we're talking today about what an operations manual is. And I really want to emphasize most importantly, how to not create garbage that nobody reads or doesn't get used. I'm sure there's a few guys on here that could probably relate to, our safety manuals. In Ontario here, we have to have them. I'll be the first one to say that I've never actually read through the 600-page document that has to be in every one of our trucks, and I don't think any of my guys have either. Um, that's not the way to create an operations manual. So when I'm saying operations manual, it goes more than just paper, but we need to start with getting it down. We need to start with writing it, and then I'm going to give you, some ideas on how to actually make these things useful and something that gets used in onboarding and training, and allow you to actually get things removed from your everyday to-dos and get other people assigned, and even we'll go as far as how to use AI agents to take over some tasks. So we're gonna have a lot of fun on this call for anybody that is really looking to become the delegator in their business. Okay, so again, having worked with hundreds and hundreds of contractors, the biggest problem that we encounter first before we can, you know, generally get to the growth part is where their time is going, right? So when your business runs on you, that's not an asset. That's really a hostage situation. Okay. So again, I've been in this position myself personally. All right. And it seems to be especially true in the businesses, between that $1 and $5 million mark, where the owner is really the rake, right? Everything moves up through them and requires them to make a decision one way or another. And really, what we see in these businesses most often is that they have to micromanage because they have no other options. Okay, so we micromanage, and I'll just define it for you in terms of a contractor. When you have to lead by you shoulda, you coulda, all right, that is the epitome of micromanagement. Okay. And that generally means that you never properly train somebody how to properly do the job in the first place. And therefore, again, we have to use the tools that we have on our hands. And that's you shoulda, you coulda, kind of hope and pray that they can do it. And then when they don't meet our expectations, we have to come down on them and try to get them to do it. It's a very inefficient way to get staff, and it also creates a lot of damage, and it creates employees that are dependent on you and afraid to make mistakes. And that is a very unhealthy situation that you're probably going to get annoyed with and stop doing pretty quickly. Right. So 92% of $1 million contractors have zero documented SOPs. It's all between their ears. Okay. 3.7x valuation multiple for contractors with documentation systems versus without the same revenue. So this is, again, if you're thinking of selling your business, and we should always be thinking about selling our business. All right. And what I mean by this term is we want to be able to get valuation. We want to have a company that's in a liquidable state. Okay. If I'm an investor and I want to buy your business, the first thing I'm going to look for, besides profit and EBITDA, is I'm going to look at your documentation. How easy is it, or how realistic is it for me to remove the owner and have a functioning business? Now, I can say personally, very, very few contractors are in this position or this role, and it's very dangerous. Okay. It means in essence that you've built a product that is you. All right. Take you out of there, out of your business, and it all falls down. Okay. That is a hostage situation. You are chained to this business, no matter which way you want to play it. So again, one of the most boringest, tedious things to do is creating SOPs. Again, I see that most contractors aren't good at them. It's part of the problem that we have addressed. Myself personally, I'll be honest with you. I'm not the best at them either. I hire people who are really good at doing them. And now we've actually systemized it so AI can do it as well. And I'll be walking you through that today. So zero is what it sells for. When we don't have any documentation, all right, when we don't have the basics, how and what and where, nobody's buying that business from you. Okay. Even if you are profitable, even if you're showing a good EBITDA, all right, especially in that 1 to 5 range, your business is worth $0. Okay. And this is a scary reality that most contractors are going to face, especially in the next coming years. For every 11 businesses that go up for sale, one is going to sell. All right. And it's simply for this reason to start with. All right. No documentation, no way to measure results. Okay. A lot of gray area in their business. And it shows in every avenue. Right. And construction in general is been like this for a long time. And nowadays it's really unnecessary, and it's going to hurt your opportunities, your chances of using AI in your business as well. And I'll be the first one to tell you again, SOPs are essentially the exact same thing that you would give to an AI agent that can perform a task for you. All right, now think about that. Right, so by taking on something like this, you can actually be installing agents instead of people. All right, keeping your overhead low, raising your valuation. Okay, I very much believe that the future of contracting will essentially be your algorithm that you build in your business. And I'll get into that in a little bit and show you real examples of what that means. All right. So the type of guilty in chat, right? Quoted a job from memory because you didn't have the time to look up the real numbers. Give me a one in the chat if you've ever done that, made that mistake. All right, let's see if you guys are active today. Give me a one in the chat if you're guilty of that. Okay. Trained a new guy by saying, just watch what I do. All right. Or the shut up and work. Don't make mistakes. I was brought up in that era, all right, where you just hoped and prayed and trial by fire. Not a great way to try and train people these days. Give me a one in the chat if you're guilty of that. Tried explaining your business to someone in 30 seconds and couldn't do it. Okay. Especially see this true if you've gotten to the level of hiring a PM. I've made this mistake myself. I probably would do it again if I didn't have a really great team behind me helping me generate the training material and stuff to not be this guy anymore. Okay. Got asked a question by a crew lead. You've already answered 50 times. Right? How often has that happened? Or a variation of that, answering the same questions over and over again. Okay. I want you to think about this in another way. If I were to ask your employees or staff, all right, the same question I asked you, would I get the same answer back? All right. Or would it be told in a different way? Given a different, set of instructions. That's a great example of what I see on a day-to-day basis where there is no solid bottom line answer. All right. On a lot of things, we call this the gray area. So from the PM to the owner, they might give you two different answers. Okay. Not a lot of confidence there. Realized after the fact that nobody invoiced the client for the extra work. All right. Fell through the cracks. Said I'll write it down later about a process. Never did. Right. How many of you guys have been thinking about or know better and know that you should have these things in place? All right. Hopefully you're here today to try and solve that problem, but you're smart enough to know you should have them, but we've always got this time issue. And the other thing we don't really talk about is the skill and the will to do it, right? So I'm going to say, if anybody's here listening to me today, all right, unless you are the type of person that would like to sit in a quiet room and do SOPs all day, and that gives you a lot of energy, all right, and you really get excited about that, all right, we should be looking at how we can delegate this or systemize it. Okay. We don't want to be doing things that are outside of the zone of genius. All right. So maybe you're great at estimating, selling jobs. That is far more valuable to your company than doing this. And I know that sounds like a contradiction. All right. But I'm going to be able to show you today how it's not. All right. We want to make sure that we are moving the process forward, but not necessarily doing it ourselves. That's not a great use of our time, especially with, the available tools that are out there today. Okay. So what is an operations manual? Isn't a binder, right? It's 5 plays that run the company. So again, we're talking about what should be in this operations manual. Okay. What are the core things we want to cover? Right? Quoting how you price, right? These are rules, these are guidelines, these are benchmarks, these are standards. Okay, this is a method or methodology, right? That we want to have. Why? Because in the very near future, I promise you this, especially what we already have and I've already harnessed, the role of estimator will no longer exist. Okay, we're already at that stage where we can instant quote. All right. Um, and we can use AI to learn if they haven't already have the rules and the skills, but every business has some specific nuance that when you train to an AI, now becomes more of a data entry job, and estimating is a data entry job at its core. Okay. The only thing that makes it different is experience. So when we're looking at scopes, we can visualize the job. Okay. A lot of that is actually learned through mistakes, right? Our trial and error when we've done this, right? Good estimators, the best that I've seen, all right, they've got a lot of pain in their background. They've learned through a lot of trial and error, all right, through job costings, if they're looking at numbers, okay, through running jobs yourself. Again, this is where I'm talking about the pain. It doesn't have to be that way. Okay. There are definitely gold standard rules for estimating. All right. Those are the variables that would change just a straight data entry, such things as square footage. What's that mean in a real construction site? All right. Good news is that a lot of it can be trained, it can be taught. All right. But if you don't have the operations and how you're supposed to do that, if you don't have the SOPs and the context to add to it, you can't employ an agent to do your estimating. It won't work. Okay. And again, I'm saying agent for guys that are getting to that advanced level or people that just want to skip the whole, pain of trying to find an estimator eventually, or any of these roles that I'm going to talk about, right? Workflow. All right. So we talk about this a lot. Nearly 93% of the problems that happen in the field are a result of sales to production handoff. Okay. Meaning that it either doesn't exist or it's done so poorly that we are forced, all right, to react to problems in the field or react to problems on the job, which drive down our margins, which makes our jobs, painful and bad experiences and for both the customer and for ourselves. Or we're the person, the number one firefighter that's putting out all the fires that we've created, all right, through our poor estimating, and it just keeps going down the line. And again, if there was ever a recipe for burnout, which I deal with a lot of burnt out owners out there. All right. I've been in this position myself. And it all comes back down to, again, getting those things from your sales to production and your workflow out of your head, looking for the errors and the mistakes that have been made repeatedly. All right. And then systemizing. Right. So we've got to get everything documented first. All right. Measured second, delegated third. All right. And then we can automate, right? Which is a lot of fun at fourth, right? We can do that in those order. All right. Life becomes a lot different as a contractor, and you start to get an unfair advantage if you do it properly. All right. An unfair advantage is being able to operate at a lower cost over a competitor. All right. And we're going to see this, whether you like it or not, the next 6 to 12 months, you either do or you don't. All right. And we'll see who's standing after that. Right. People, right? How we hire, how we train, when we fire. Okay. So think of your whole HR department. All right. How are we managing them? What are the rules to the game that we're playing? All right. And again, why are we bringing these up? Because we're going to train these. I'm going to show you a method of training this where it becomes clear, not just putting it in a obscure document that nobody sees. All right. We're going to turn these documents into real training, real rules, real progress forward, which is exciting. All right. Not exciting in doing it necessarily, but exciting when it gets installed in your business. All right. Next, money. Who approves what? Okay. Very important. I was just having a conversation with a client this morning about just this thing, right? What are the rules to managing money? What are the rules to signing checks? What are the rules to, when a job runs over? Okay. Who has authority to order material? Right. Again, we always want to be getting ourselves prepared to make ourselves the least important, most important person in our business. All right. If our time is spent every Friday, again, writing checks, doing payroll, doing the financial parts of the business, congratulations. All right. You've now moved yourself from a $200 an hour role down to a $25 an hour role. All right. Or lost the opportunity to actually automate a lot of these things. But we need rules. We need to know how the money is handled. Okay. And if that's not clear, right, it's not out of your head, um, definitely will always be stuck in that position, right? So then your comms, everything scripted, emails, workflows, sales process, things along those lines. And now we have a sales playbook. I'm not going to get into that on purpose here. Sales playbook would be kept separate, a big separate section. Here's a lot of detail into how we sell. As far as I'm concerned, we've created a second whole playbook operation that looks very similar to this. All right. And especially if you're looking to scale your business, your sales and marketing is a big part of that. I've kept that out of here. All right. But it still needs to be the interaction. Okay. What emails get sent? How's the client experience handled? Right. When do we notify them of jobs? How do we deal with, scheduling jobs? All these little details that, again, maybe you're doing all of them, maybe you're not. What a great opportunity to see where your areas for improvement are. All right. But if it only exists in your head, you might have great ideas that aren't getting executed on. And I can tell you that's very frustrating as an owner to know what to do. All right. But not have the resources, time, energy, or maybe the finance to make those things happen. Right. So wishing, but not taking any action. Okay. So again, we kind of went through this, but how do you price every time? No exceptions, right? These should be very cut and dry. There's nobody here that can give me a type of work that doesn't have a standard to it. All right. Now, when we've made the standard up in our head, which most of us have, okay, I see all different types of methods of estimating that even surprise me to this day and just how, but there is a gold standard. There are general rules for every type of estimate. And I can assure you, all right, it's been mastered. Okay. We can always improve in this area, but the easiest way to do it is just having pricing rules. What's our margin? Okay. How are we marking up our materials? All right. What is our expectation of outcome? All right. Scope, our language, how our quotes are laid out. All right. By the way, for you guys that have maybe not connected these dots before, all right, when we're truly in control of our business financially, all right, which we should all be, right, from the management accounting perspective, a couple things need to be in place, right? They start with your cost codes. Okay. Again, what's a cost code? It's a group of products, labor, subcontractor rates, all right, put together that we run consistently. Okay. We're always testing them, right? Checking them for validation, right? So again, a drywall might have a subcontractor rate and a material rate in it for you, right? It would be a standard drywall cost code. Okay. Every time we run it, we're going to know what our outcome was, our margin. We have an opportunity to improve that cost code so that one day we get to within what we call a variance, a 5% variance. So from what you budgeted in your estimate and got accepted to what the actual cost came out to be. Okay. Now, again, like I just said, it's more than just a cost code. There's rules inside of that that you need to be clear about. All right. So, for example, doing a, 10-story commercial building in drywall is a lot different than doing a single home in drywall, right? Now, for the most part, it's the same thing. We're putting up drywall, okay? But there's variances in there. There's variables that we have to be able to cover if we're doing that both scopes, okay? And we want to be inclusive, exclusive. All right. This is going to be very helpful for you getting to the stage of instant quote, or what we're really able to do is look through plans and be able to provide a very quick quote without having to do a lot of manual work ourselves. Okay. Payment terms, deposits, milestones. Okay. Setting these up in the beginning lead to the next thing that you need to have that ties to your management accounting is schedules. All right. Following that, we have job costs, we have job autopsies, we have cash flow projections. Okay. Notice everything that I'm talking about here in management accounting, all right, has to do with looking into the future. Why? Again, as business owners, I constantly have the same reoccurring problem. Everybody kind of runs into it as the feast and famine. All right. Not being able to see ahead. Clearly enough, a good contractor lives 90 days in the future. All right. They know where their cash is. They know what their profit is. They know their numbers and they're managing their business with those numbers. Okay. They're not just panicking and, making off the cuff decisions that are going to have effect downstream. Right. And a good example of this that I'll share with you makes it really simple. How many of you guys have shut your marketing off? All right. The second you've gotten too many jobs and went, oh my God, I got too much work, and shut your marketing off and just focused on producing the work. How many of you guys have done that? Okay. That's a
Yep.
great example. Yeah. So again, we can't do that. That is a pure, again, it's a data-driven process. All right. What we aren't realizing is that there's natural ups and downs in our business, and we need to be selling on a 12-month schedule, right? We need to be looking at our backlog in 90 days, right? Living truly 90 days in the future requires these management accounting processes in our business. Okay. Now, just to be clear, and I know I might sound like a broken telephone to some of our members on here, but there's another type of accounting that gets confused. All right. Is that we have our regulatory accounting. That's your QuickBooks. That's your accountant. That's your bookkeeper. Okay. I will be the first one to tell you is that is always in the past. It's always behind. Okay. It's not giving you real-time information to make decisions with, nor will it ever. Its only job is to report your income to the government. Okay. Don't rely on that for running your jobs. You will never be satisfied, right? Nor will you catch things in time to be able to do anything about them. Okay. There's nothing worse than finding out, all right, at the end of the year when you do your taxes that you didn't make any money. Okay. There's nothing worse, really. I mean, again, if we're not, working towards a stage where everything's real time, all right, you're going to fall behind very quickly. All right. And what's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months is that the cost of doing this is going to go dramatically down. Okay. Because we can use AI, because we can, for the most part, automate some of these, what used to be higher level functions. We can actually have those operate without us. Okay. Or with little input. Okay. So again, but it still requires you, just like an employee, to have the SOPs, to have the processes, the systems, to be clear about these things. So again, you're not bringing an agent into or an employee or whoever you're going to bring in. I still believe in, people, they can still play these roles, but we have to be super clear. Okay. We have to have it written down out of our head, right? From the sold to closeout, the same steps every time. Again, I see guys make the same mistakes over and over and over again, right? So from sold to pre-con, your materials, your build, your quality control, your closeout, right? If there's anywhere where you have gray area, all right, where things are not clear, right? Things aren't, directly and how to do it, and you can't hold a person accountable to that, all right? You're not going to have an efficient role, and you're going to get frustrated. You're going to retreat back. I see this a lot as well, where we make a hire, they don't work out the way we wanted them to, and then we give up on that process and we just assume that only I can do that. How many of you guys have that in your head right now about things in your business? Give me a one in the chat if you feel like you are the only one in your business that can do a certain thing, wear a certain hat. Okay, I've certainly been there. I know that feeling. All right. It's the ultimate feeling of stuck. Right. Only I can do this. Well, that may be presently true. All right. But it doesn't have to be that way. Okay. Each stage, who owns it? What triggers next? What artifact, right? What thing, validates that thing's done that doesn't require you having to be involved. Okay. And again, I want you to think, I'm going to delegate. All right. Now, one thing about delegation that no one really recognizes or says, all right, and it's always interesting to me how coaches out there bring it up, and they say, yeah, you've just got to create a role description and then hire a PM, and that's basically the advice that I hear going on out there. You got to just be clear with this thing. That's bullshit. I'll be the first to tell you. That's not going to get you too far, right? And again, it's just the way that people learn, taking information, right? That's not really going to clear your plate. All right. The work only begins at that point. That's literally step one before you even hire. Okay. What about all the other things down the line? What does their day-to-day tasks look like? What is exactly the things that they need to do? And how do we hold them responsible? How do we keep ourselves from getting involved? Right. I want you to think more on that line. How do I keep myself from having to go in and put out fires? Okay. We'll know we didn't do this well when our PM or whoever we've hired comes back to you every day with multiple questions, and sometimes the same questions that have to be reinforced. And it's every day, day after day after day. And then they simply don't do those things. All right. That's a surefire sign that either we got the wrong person or we don't have a great process. All right. So again, checklists, how do we know things have been signed off, that the process has been followed? Where's the validation? And again, does it involve us managing it? Because great way to put yourself from a $200 an hour role. And we were just kind of joking about this earlier on another call, and having supervisors for your supervisors who have another supervisor, right? Really terrible way. We're not running government contracts here, right? We're not the government themselves, right? We can't afford to do those things in the real world. Okay, so what are the answers? Well, I'll get to that in just a moment. So another big one I see is closeout packages, photos, warranties, invoices, client experience, right? Again, when are they done? How are they done? If that's still in your head and you're still doing it, you're right. You're the only one that can. Okay. The hire train, the whole cycle from, again, like I said, job description, you'll see is number one here, right? But what about day one? What's expected at the end of week one? What are they supposed to be able to do, right? How do we know that they're capable of doing it? Where's our record of training, right? Day 30, what should they be able to do at stage, day 30? And then, what's the repercussion if they can't? What do we do in that stage? Right? Again, how many of you guys have made a hire, kept them around for 6 to 8 months just to realize that, hey, this is really not the right person for the role? Anybody made that mistake? And they really contributed nothing. You just got 6 months into them, and again, you're still like day one. Okay. I know I'm guilty of it. All right. It happens. All right. And this just is because we haven't been clear enough. All right. Unfortunately, I'll be the first to say that's not a them problem, that's a you problem, because you should have known by week one if they were capable or not. Right? Definitely by day 30. If you didn't know by day 30 and they didn't have what it took, it's time to cut those ties. It's time to, call out your bench and get somebody else in there that can, right? It all comes down to not having those conversations in your head of, well, they do this good or that good. No, it should be black and white, right? No room. It's either black and white. It's yes or it's no. If there's anything in between, you've got work to do. Okay. The daily huddle, right? The weekly one-to-one, the monthly review cadence. Okay. Firing playbook. What forces you to fire someone? What counts and how does it go? Right? Back to the money thing real quick. I won't spend too much time on it, but who approves what? The money moves approval matrix, again, from 500 to 5K to 50K, who's in those tiers? Who has, authority to make those purchases or issue POs? Okay. Invoicing, who chases AR and escalation, right? Owner draw, paying yourself, right? What do you get paid? Your fixed amount, your fixed date. Weekly 30-minute cash flow review. Again, I threw in there bookkeeper, but this really, really should be something that's just reported on nowadays. Doesn't even require them to do that. Okay. Again, when we're looking at, every script, every email, every touch point, why is this important in your operations? All right. Because it has a lot to do with their client experience. Operations is about the whole process. Okay. So, we just signed. What happens next? Is there a welcome email? What happens next, right? Day before sent out, confirmation scripts, the mid job, weekly progress text templates, right? The closeouts, the walkthrough, the warranty, right? The review ask, right? Everything has to be out of your head, has to be well documented, has to be proven. All right. Now, I want you guys to think for a second. All right. Out of 10, how many of these things are like, where are you from 1 to 10? Right. So quoting, workflow, people, money, comms. Where are you? If you're brave enough, let me know out of 50, where are you at? Drop that in the chat for me. Let me know you guys are actively listening. If you're on the feed, you can drop it in the live feed too. All right. Yeah. All right. 30. 4. 5. Yeah. Okay. Some honest answers there. Appreciate that. Right. Okay. So again, let's start moving towards the solution to these things. Okay. So maybe I'll share just before we jump into that. I'll miss my point. We'll share just a quick example of what, getting these things done can do for you. Okay. Um, and just out of curiosity, I promise will be the last question. When was the last time anybody here took a vacation? Could truly take a full vacation, right? Where they didn't have to worry. So they could have a business that operated without them. Okay. Function, they come back, right? Most of us can't remember. Okay. So this is all about finding freedom. How do we actually discover true freedom? And what does freedom mean, right? In my humble opinion, again, is we should be using our business, right, or the business profit to provide ourselves freedom, and it's time freedom. Okay, not necessarily money freedom. You know, we can look at it that way. Most people are chasing the money side of it. I promise you that it's time first, right? And again, if anyone's made substantial money in this business, right, you'll know, all right, that your freedom becomes the problem when chasing just the money. All right. And we can make a lot of very silly mistakes. Okay. So we really want to get to the point where we're buying back our time and our freedom. All right. And keeping that at a cost where we can, add profit to our business or lower overheads or increase productivity. Okay. We want to get away from thinking that we can do everything ourselves. Okay. So I'll give you a great example of this. We had a recent client that's been using our SOP playbook, right? Was basically took him the weekend to write the quoting playbook, another weekend for the people, and another three came over the 6 months. It does sound like a lot. It actually isn't, and I'm going to show you today how it can be even less, right? But added up 5 weekends of work, right? Again, 5 weekends. And this was a little while ago, all right, but that gave him back 15 hours a week every week, right, for the rest of his business existence, and maybe hundreds, if not thousands, depending on where you're going, right? So let's think about the reward here for getting this kind of thing off your plate. Okay. And what it does lead to is allowing you to be, and what I want you to think of, if you are currently the be all everything, wearing all the hats in your business, okay, really struggling to find the people that can do the thing, or, you haven't found that unicorn yet that can just come in and read your thoughts and, perform the same way you do. All right. By the way, I don't believe they exist. I've yet to see one. If someone has found one, let me know. I'll come borrow it for a bit. All right. We can't wish for unicorns. We've got to create them. Okay. So last thing I'm gonna share before my review. I know I keep saying last, but I wonder how many people here on the call has heard this before, right? I don't have time to write SOPs. Anybody here saying that to themselves right now? I don't have time. I imagine there is a few, right? Or how do you even do it? All right. Do I really need 5 weekends? My answer to you is going to be no, right? My business is too custom for playbooks. I get this quite a lot. So every $5 million contractor said this at 1 million. And then they wrote them anyway. And guess what? They grow. Okay. And again, I'm going to show you how it can be stupid simple, almost the biggest cheat code you've got, right? My team won't actually follow them. And I will agree with you if you write them in the nearest form. So going to ChatGPT is maybe a good place to start, right? I think we'll all, I can contest to that. All right. But it's definitely not the end result that will work, right? Your guys will not read AI garbage, all right? They will not act on it. It will not connect, right? That's the problem with using AI necessarily to write it out of context. Okay. And you're definitely not going to be, having a complete workflow. All right. So, and I've tried before and it didn't stick. All right. Wrote a 30-page document. I think I just had a client tell me this and why they didn't think they would work. And I agree with you. All right. I think that, writing a bunch of content, all right, without the context, without the thought of now, how do I train the real world, the real staff, let's just say our B and C players, how do I get them to actually absorb this? How do I get them to actually, use the SOP or run the process the way I want? Okay. And those are important questions to ask. All right. So let's take a look. I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if you guys can see this. You guys see my screen here? Should see mission control. Yeah? No? Let me just reset here. Okay, so you should be able to see my mission control right here. What I'm showing you is basically the system we have here at Contractor AI. And I'm going to walk you through kind of a process that works really well for our clients, all right, and writing the SOPs. Starting with our operations manual, and essentially what you have to do, all right, to create a really good operations manual and training, right? So we start off with, what the process is for this, this particular SOP, our technology software stack. Um, what we're able to do is basically break down the SOP so it's done every single time. Now, this is automatically done for you as you highlight sections of it. It makes corrections. So if you see something that's not exactly correct, but for the most part, these are templates that you have to do very little work to make them your own. So first of all, you can listen to these. All right, we have a feature. You just click and listen to it. Make sure everything's accurate the way you want it. All right, the way it should be. You fill out a quick onboarding form so we get the gist of it, and then our agents go to work and generate you your operations manual from all of the categories we just talked about. All right, and then we can make adjustments. You can change anything you want. It's done pretty quick, usually about 2 to 3 minutes per SOP, 10 to 15 on the high range. All right, the agent will adjust them. We ask you a couple questions to make sure that they're truly customized to your business. Because here's the thing, all right? I don't know if anybody here would put their hand up for this. Is there anybody that secretly likes to wear other people's underwear? All right?
No.
We have the same saying in business: don't wear somebody else's underwear. So, for example, when you use ChatGPT, you are getting the most generic, watered down piece of garbage that you can possibly get. And the most part, why it doesn't feel like you could implement it in your business is because you can't. All right. It's taking context from something else that may be close. All right. But it's, again, it's essentially shooting, trying to come up with stuff that might be for a $5 or $10 million, company that has a whole other set of problems. You don't know where that content's being pulled from. Okay. So it's the perfect example of content without context. All right. So how does this work for your business and your situation? All right. And then it has a very difficult time in linking things together. All right. Having an actual workflow, going through problems and solving them with you. All right. Our system aims to address that in that, the content that we're sharing with you, it comes from our own experience in writing many, many thousands of these before ChatGPT, right? Before we had AI, which has made things much faster, all right? But it doesn't have the exact content and nor the context for what you're doing in your business. Again, the nuance, the step by steps, the things that are going to make these things actually useful. All right. So now you've essentially done the documentation on the system. All right. We can now download an actual branded document, right? That's available for us. So, but we don't really want to stop there because that doesn't really answer well, how do I train my team? Because I promise you, if you gave your team just this blank document and asked them to listen to it, right? They might listen to it, but most likely they're not going to perform or come out a little bit more confused than where they started. All right. Generally, SOPs tend to be a really poor way of training overall. All right. Great way of getting it out of your head. It's important. It's a very important step, but it should be leading to an actual training that you would provide. So our system then generates a video of that content. All right. We respin it so that it's teachable. right? It's not going through an SOP like, like a robot, right? But it's actually teaching the real content to it, right? Applying it to your business, personalizing it if you wish. Okay. Creating the SOP that they can understand. But more importantly, all right, there's testing that is going to go on and that's going to occur. All right. So they're going to be able to be tested on that piece of content that you're teaching them. All right. It's all validated to your business. They're going to go through the actual test. All right. We're going to get a score back. And now we have a record of training. Right. We have proof that the person that we have in the role, all right, is in fact competent. Right. So if they were to come back to you, which I'm going to talk about in a second, wouldn't be the way I would do this. All right. If they were to come back to you with a question, right, we can point them back to the resource. You know why? Because we want to have consistency with the message that's being shared. All right. So I shared with you a little earlier how, again, in any setting, all right, when we have a person in authority to a subordinate, all right, two things happen. Number one, all right, there's always going to be some fear between the two, all right, of, maybe looking stupid or asking bad questions, right? It's just general people's nature, all right? They won't speak up in a lot of situations. They'll feel intimidated too, all right? It doesn't create the best environment for learning, for support, okay? And then on top of that, I don't know if you guys have had it. I'm a real construction guy, right? So I work with this stuff daily. It doesn't matter. Some people are great at training, some people aren't. I would say that most people aren't, all right? Therefore, all right, the type of information and training that, a new employee or staff member receives from somebody that's really not great at doing it in the first place is going to be low grade. And you might get different answers across the board, right? You might get, a PM may be confused on something and giving them two different answers. Okay. But let's just take the whole answer part away, right? So again, what we've created here is a onboarding agent, right? This is an AI. So if you get to the stage where you have this training, you have these modules, all right, I want you to take the next step, which we provide, all right, where we actually have an agent now that when the new hire has a question, by the way, this would be an example of their portal, right? So they have their training, they'd have their modules that they'd have to finish up. All right. We would know which stage they're in. Again, we'd apply it to their 30-day plan. All right. But they also get access to an onboarding agent. All right. That's an agent that they can have a chat with about anything in your business that applies to their role. They can ask them the question. Ask away, ask as many as you want. All right. It's unlimited amount of questions they can ask. All right. Now, how do you think they would feel more comfortable in that setting versus the busy supervisor, busy manager, or you, right? Do you have necessarily all the time? Do you get frustrated when people ask you the same questions over and over again? All right. Does it maybe take away your confidence in them? Right. So somebody doesn't learn as quickly as you'd like them to, and you get frustrated. Okay. Well, let's eliminate that. Right. And again, think about the environment you're inviting someone to work in. Does this tell them, all right, that you truly care about and you have an organized business that they can see a future in? Absolutely. All right. And guess what? You can do an entire manual, right? We're talking tons and tons of months of training, right? Maybe they're doing 10 or 15 minutes a day, right? They can use the AI agent to fill in the blanks, to remove gray areas. And then ultimately, you have someone that can supervise that person, that role, right? Using the onboarding agent, which, again, works super effectively. All right. They're able to now have those conversations and chat privately on their own time or, when something comes up and they're not, burdened by having to ask the manager, right? Waiting till the morning to ask. All right. Then something's not getting done. And then the whole thing starts to fall apart, right? And we get bad impressions of people, right? That wasn't necessarily fair. We all learn different ways. Okay. This is aiming at solving that problem, more or less at its core. Okay. So I've done a lot of talking so far here. I'd love to hear anybody else's problems or issues. If you had any questions about the system in general or a problem you're having, I'd love to answer. I'm an open book. Anything that you're struggling with, let me know. If you want to throw it in the chat there or unmute yourself, I'm glad to have a conversation with you as well. I think I've seen a few people that were interested. Maria, can you throw my link? If anybody's struggling with this, love to help you out. If you could throw my booking link in the chat while we're having this conversation too. Happy to go through, come up with a game plan. If you're interested, if you this is something you want to delegate, get off your plate. Um, promise you we can do it much more efficiently, easier, doesn't have to be painful. All right. Okay. Quiet group today. Just check our live feed. About 30 of me. Oh, Ryan, it looks like you've got some things in place. It's good, right? Yeah. Now, what I did mention to you guys before was, the importance of more than ever, you would think that, with AI and agents and stuff that we could just have them think for themselves. That doesn't quite work that way, right? So if you're considering putting AI in any area of your business, all right, I can't stress this enough. It needs a lot of content and context to how to operate, all right? AI agents especially are like being in the room with the smartest person you've ever met, shackled to the stupidest person you've ever met. Okay, meaning that they can do everything right, right, but just make the most obvious stupid mistake that's going to, bring the whole thing down very quickly, right? And we have to be able to put them in a compartment, right? We have to be able to make sure if they're capable of reaching out to clients or they have any real responsibility that it is completely documented what they can and can't do. All right. You don't want to have a rogue agent running around. For anyone that's scared of AI, we'll just put it as the employee, right? We can imagine that, right? Just having some, Wild West employee that's maybe knows what they're doing, but doesn't care about the rules. We don't want that. Okay. Very, very good. All right. All right. So just want to ask you guys a few more questions and we'll wrap this baby up. Maybe to get some thoughts on, what's next in the process. I did want to share with you guys, for somebody that's just starting out, maybe this is all a bit overwhelming. Totally get that. And I want to make sure that you know how to solve your problem today without me. All right, without really even ChatGPT or anything like that. I'll tell you how I started my journey with SOPs and solving my own personal problems. Everyone have a cell phone here? Anybody not using a cell phone? Hopefully. Okay. All right, great. Well, that's the most powerful SOP tool you have ever. Okay. Easiest way to solve a problem. Let's say it's, disorganized truck. All right. I'll start with the basics. How should the truck look at the end of the day? Where do things go? Okay. What tools have to go back in which place? The easiest way to do that and what your expectation is, pull your phone out of your pocket, press record, walk through it. Don't get caught up in it having to be a production, all right? Or set up a tripod. Again, go through the process. All right. Maybe it takes one or two times. All right. That is essentially as good as an SOP. If any you want to get a little fancier than that, you can use another app. All right. That will put the captions in it or create the document from it. Lots of opportunity out there for those as well. But starting off with, shoot a video. Okay, if you are answering the same questions over and over again, okay, about anything, shoot a Loom video. Loom's very good for writing the SOP if you need to be. Okay, you can just pop that up on your screen, go through the workflow, bam. Right, doesn't have to be a Hollywood production. You can get that problem solved today for yourself, right? So however you choose, all right, as long as you're taking action from this last, I don't know, 50 minutes that you spent with me, all right? I just want to see you genuinely, take some action from today. Again, simple as shooting a quick video. That is good enough if you're just starting out, all right? As you get a little bit bigger, I'm going to say, We should be thinking about these things if we want to add real valuation to our business. Getting the whole thing documented, getting the whole process is important. All right. But for now, if you're just trying to get back time to even get to these kind of things, okay, easiest way, take the one thing that you're having to consistently tell people about. Okay. Shoot that video and send it to them. All right. Keep it on your phone and you can just fire them off at will. Okay. Somebody that's being hired now, we can accumulate a few of those. All right. We can get them more polished, we can get them more detailed, but it's taking that first step, that first action towards creating your own SOPs that matters most. Okay. Again, what I showed you in the background, that solves the problem of a company trying to go from, 1 million to 10 million to 15 to 20. Okay. It may not be where you're at right now. Okay. And I totally get that. But done is better than perfect. Okay, so instead of worrying about perfection or creating this thing that's a monster for you, all right, I would prefer that you just took imperfect action today. Okay, the imperfect action is a wobbly shit video that just gets the point across. Okay, that's all we need to do. That is the whole point of it. Okay, don't worry about if you're good or not behind camera. I find that the more you put doubt in your own mind, the less things get done, right? It gives you a reason to procrastinate. Don't worry about the quality of your phone. Again, I've literally shot these on those old school flip phones back in my day, right? I think I had like 35 seconds per video. That shows how old I'm getting, I guess, but there you go. All right. Anybody confused? Anybody unsure of the actions that they're taking? Anybody committed today to taking some action? One way or the other? Maybe give me a one in the chat and let me know that I've spent some time today to create some change for you. Cool. All right. So again, I hope everybody's been able to at least take a takeaway from our call today. Glad to have you back. We'll be talking more in depth on these in the next coming weeks and other things that we can add to it. All right. But it all, again, starts at its core. All right. Nothing happens. And you can't use more tech, more technology. All right. Until we, come to the first part. And that's doing the boring stuff. Ain't nobody like to do this stuff, I promise. It's more like, I rather, you know, put a fork in my eye, to be honest with you, than doing these. But it's a necessary evil. It's something we have to do. All right. So whether you delegate it, whether you do it yourself, again, don't get too caught up in the details. Just take action. All right. Actions lead to better things than thinking about the most perfect process for it. And I don't think any of us here will find that immediately, no matter which route we go. So again, hope you've taken some value from it, and we'll chat soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.